CBS 6 News starts now.
Well, first at noon, it was a trial that was expected to last as long as 6 weeks. Now it looks like it's going to wrap up with about 6 days. Attorneys have rested, giving their closing arguments this morning in Nauman Hussein's criminal trial in the Schoharie limo crash. Hussein facing 20 counts each of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide for each person that was killed in that crash. CBS 6's Jacquie Slater joining us live at the Schoharie courthouse this afternoon. Jacquie, obviously a lot to unpack as this case is now handed off to a jury.
That's right, Julia, a lot to unpack, and also, as you mentioned, a lot quicker than many thought that we'd be here for these closing arguments. The defense took about an hour to give their closing remarks this morning. The prosecution is right now giving theirs inside the courtroom. Our Ashley Dager is inside there watching it all unfold. She's been covering this trial extensively since the very beginning. But here's a look at some of what was mentioned inside today during those closing remarks by attorney Lee Kinlan. Kinlan outlined a timeline to the jury, presenting a timeline showing what occurred in the months leading up to the crash. He discussed how many times Hussein brought the limo into Mavis Discount Tire with concerns about the vehicle, but Kinlan once again stressed those concerns were never truly addressed by the repair shop. He doubled down on previous statements about Virgil Park, the Mavis store manager at the time, calling him self-serving criminal, saying he falsified business and work records. And then he also talked about a mechanic that passed the inspection on the limo. He was brought up. Kinlan said if this mechanic would have just refused to pass the inspection, maybe none of us would be here today. Kinlan wrapping up his closing arguments with the following message to the jury.
A verdict of not guilty will point the way to the true culprits. Ladies and gentlemen, justice is a light in the darkness. You now have the whole picture. You can now see everything. You can now help the world see the whole picture. Light the way for others. Find him not guilty.
So again, the prosecution right now wrapping up their case, and then this decision will be in the hands of the jury. No idea at this point how long it might take for them to deliberate. Now, we will, of course, have full coverage of the day's events starting at 5 today. We're also going to hear from attorney Paul Derahanassian, who has been giving us his expert opinion and breakdown on the trial so far. Again, right now, prosecution wrapping up their closing arguments, and then this will go to the jury. Live in Schoharie this afternoon, Jacquie Slater, CBS 6 News.
CBS 6 News starts now.
Our top story tonight, the jury is deliberating in the Schoharie limousine crash criminal trial. The real shocker came yesterday when both sides rested just a week into the trial.
Continuing our coverage tonight, CBS 6's Ashley Dager is live outside the courthouse with our legal analyst, Paul Derahanassian, talking about the fact that this trial wrapped up in days and not weeks, as predicted. Ashley.
After a week of testimony, the trial is now in the hands of the jury. Paul, can you just walk us through what the jury will be going through now to reach a verdict?
Well, whatever they think the issues are. For example, what did the defendant know? How was he thinking about when he was told information by DOT? And when they debate that, if they have a difference of opinion as to what a witness said, they're going to ask for that testimony to be read back. If they're not sure what the law is on causation, they'll send a note to the judge and ask for the law to be read back.
Now, my next question, were you surprised at all that the defense called no witnesses to the stand?
Not really, because if you don't have to call witnesses, you don't, because it's easier to destruct than construct. Work off the prosecution case, make your points. And I think Lee Kinlan felt he was able to do that without risking putting his client on the stand and all the questions that he may have been asked about some of these encounters.
And as we've mentioned before, Judge Lynch has said previously to the jury that this trial could take 4 to 6 weeks. It really wrapped up just in 6 days. I mean, do you think the prosecution sped up the process?
Clearly, they had a list of over 100 witnesses they said they could call. They made a decision, strategic or tactical, to not call all those witnesses. They felt they could make their case with that. And when you hear the summation, they have the proof that they need to make the argument to the jury.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank
now,
you, Ashley.
We'll have more reporting tonight over at 6 of the Schoharie trial. For now, we're reporting live in Schoharie. Ashley Dager, CBS 6 News.
I'm numb to the highs and lows of this whole thing, but I'm still nervous. I'm anxious. We very well may lose this case, and I understand that we're underdogs.
I heard it there. Strong words from Nauman Hussein's defense attorney speaking candidly to reporters after delivering his closing arguments. We wait now for a verdict in the 2018 Schoharie limo crash criminal trial. CBS 6's Ashley Dager has been in court every single day since jury selection. Ashley, this afternoon, is there any expectation for when the jury will come to a decision on this?
Well, I just walked out of that courtroom just a few moments ago, and unfortunately, there is no way of knowing how long it will take them to come to a verdict. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, or it could be sometime next week. And the jury started deliberating on Tuesday and continued again this morning at 9:30. Now, Nauman Hussein, operator of Prestige Limo Company, is the only person charged in the deaths of 20 people. 17 passengers, the limo driver, and 2 pedestrians were all killed October 6, 2018, when the limo crashed outside the Apple Barrel. Hussein faces 20 counts each of manslaughter in the second degree and criminally negligent homicide. This trial was originally expected to last at most 6 weeks, but wrapped up in just 6 days. The prosecution has called 24 witnesses, some experts of the crash and brake system of the limo, blaming catastrophic brake failure from improper maintenance. And the defense called no witnesses and have pointed the finger at Mavis Discount Tire for falsifying an inspection and services on the limo. Now I'm going to head back inside the courtroom to see if we broke for lunch or if they're still continuing to deliberate, and we will have an update for you on CBS 6 online, as well as back here at 5 o'clock. For now, reporting live in Schoharie, Ashley Dager, CBS 6 News.
CBS 6 News starts now with breaking news.
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
With respect to the crime of manslaughter in the second degree in violation of section 125.
Hold on 1 second.
Verdict reached. A jury finds Prestige limousine operator Nauman Hussein guilty on all 20 counts of manslaughter for the 20 people killed in the October 2018 crash in Schoharie.
I want to thank the jury for doing an amazing job and listening to the evidence.
I'm heartbroken. Obviously, he's disappointed. His family's devastated about the conviction.
Raw emotions in court this afternoon. Cheers and tears of relief from the victims' families and those of anguish from Hussein's family. Good evening. Just around 2:30 this afternoon, after less than 24 hours since beginning deliberations, the jury filed back into the Schoharie County courtroom to convict Nauman Hussein of the most serious charges against him, 20 counts of manslaughter.
It was a trial filled with surprises, starting with the August 2022 decision from the former judge on the case to throw out a plea deal from a previous judge, the decision that moved the case to trial in the first place. A week of jury selection ending with 3 jurors dismissed and a trial expected to last weeks, ending in days.
We have team coverage for you tonight from outside the court and at the memorial at the Apple Barrel Cafe on Route 30, where about 4.5 years ago, this unforgettable tragedy unfolded. CBS 6's Ashley Dager has been in court every day since the start of the trial. Ashley.
Greg, all day we have waited for this verdict, but the family members that sat alongside us in that courtroom have waited nearly 5 years. 20 names were read along with each charge of manslaughter in the second degree. They were read as guilty as they were met with many tears.
It's been a long time coming. It may have been a shorter trial than people thought, but for those of us sitting in that courtroom, that was a long trial, and those were long, long days.
Families of the Schoharie crash victims receiving justice after just 6 days of testimony in a long-awaited trial.
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
With respect to the crime.
4.5 years, I kept telling him, Michael, I will fight for you. I will not give up until I get justice, and praise God, it's finally been done.
The jury finding Nauman Hussein guilty on 20 counts of second-degree manslaughter more than 4 years after that tragic day. The courtroom filled with family members with tears in their eyes as they heard each charge with the same verdict. Jurors took almost a full day to seal Hussein's fate, guilty.
It was not just one thing, it was the constant showing of issues. There was this constant not taking care of things, or a constant breakdown of things that showed a pattern.
His release status is revoked, and I am remanding him to the custody of the Schoharie County Sheriff.
Those tears in the courtroom quickly turning to cheers as Hussein was taken into custody after the judge denied his lawyer's final plea for his freedom as he awaits sentencing. Now, the sentencing will be held for Hussein in just 2 weeks, May 31st at 9:30 a.m. After the verdict was read, defense attorney Lee Kinlan walked out and spoke with us, and he said that he will be appealing this decision. Reporting live in Schoharie, Ashley Dager, CBS 6 News.
Ashley, we've seen the video and we've heard the sounds from the court during the verdict. It's very eerie. Can you give us a sense in your words what it was like to actually be there during such an emotional moment?
Yeah, Liz. Every time Judge Lynch walked into that courtroom, everybody stood still, would go back into their seats, and we would wait to hear what he would say. The first one was a note, and the second one was a verdict. Now, once the jurors walked into the courtroom, it was silent. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in that room. And once the guilty charge was read, you could just feel emotion absolutely fill the room. Tears started flowing, screams started going. It was very, very powerful.
CBS 6 News starts now with breaking news.
And that breaking news tonight, a verdict in the Schoharie limo crash trial. The only man ever charged for the tragedy, convicted on 20 counts of manslaughter, 1 count for each of the 20 victims.
And when the guilty verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in emotion. Nauman Hussein operated Prestige Limo Company, the business that put the stretch limo on the road on that fateful day back in 2018. He's expected to learn his sentence in 2 weeks on May 31st.
I really, now at the end of this chapter of the case, I'm just heartbroken for everybody involved.
At this point, I think today we're going to celebrate for the families.
It may have been a shorter trial than people thought, but for those of us sitting in that courtroom, that was a long trial, and those were long, long days.
And just because this jury's work is done does not mean the legal process is over. Hussein's attorney says he will appeal.
I'm Jacquie Slater outside Schoharie County Courthouse, and as you just saw there, lots of emotion here at the courthouse today. Lots of twists and turns throughout this entire trial. And during this trial, we have often been checking in with attorney Paul Derohanassian, getting your kind of expert advice. Paul is joining me right now. Paul, we saw immediately after the guilty verdict, they put Nauman in handcuffs and they took him away. Were you expecting that? Was that unexpected?
To me, it's not unusual that a judge in this situation would remand him to jail, but I'm sure the defendant was shocked that he was being sent to jail. That's very difficult for the defense to deal with that when that happens.
So what happens now? What is Lee Kinlan doing immediately following that verdict? What can we expect in the next few days?
I think in addition to consoling the family and trying to explain what happened and what's happening next, your question, which is going to be preparing to appeal that decision concerning bail. He has the right and opportunity, if he wishes, in the coming days or weeks to make that appeal to an appellate court to try to get his client out on bail. I think that's going to be one of his priorities.
Can he get bail prior to sentencing, or is it just for if there's an appeal granted?
Good question, Jackie. He can get bail now before sentencing, and he would ask that that bail continue after sentencing. He's going to want it to be before sentencing, which may be put off beyond the scheduled date.
Do judges sometimes deny that bail?
Absolutely, they sometimes deny bail. Some judges, as a matter of practice, deny bail. And it wasn't a murder case, so it wasn't mandatory that he be sent to jail without bail. It was discretionary.
Do you see any reason why bail might be granted in this case?
Well, I think they could look and argue that his history over the last several years of this case pending, his ability and willingness to show up under these circumstances show that he's a good candidate for bail, and argue that there's some substantial legal issues.
Paul, you've been following this case closely. Is there, looking back over the last several months, even the last few years, any pivotal moments in this case that you think really determined the outcome here today?
Well, I think one of the most significant, if not the most significant legal event was Judge Lynch taking back a plea. Do you realize how unusual that is? Usually prosecutors and defendants make plea deals. They expect them to be enforced. This judge came in and said, no, I'm tearing up that plea agreement. Here's why. He outlined the case of the prosecution, which we heard in court. I think that affected so many lives. It affected the defendant, his family, it affected the victims' families, and it affected the public because it gave us a chance to hear what happened in this case, which ordinarily would have been sealed if there was a plea.
And that is why we are here today. Thank you very much, Paul. We will have more from Paul coming up at 6:30. For now, live in Schoharie, Jacquie Slater, CBS 6 News.
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty? Guilty. With respect to the crime of manslaughter in the second degree in violation of section 125.
Hold on a second.
Strong emotions taking over the courtroom as Nauman Hussein is found guilty in the deaths of 20 people killed in the 2018 Schoharie limousine crash.
Tonight, we hear from the families who lost loved ones in this horrific tragedy, sharing their joy and anguish over today's verdict.
News starts now with.
First at 6 tonight, the jury reaches its verdict in the Schoharie limousine crash trial, finding Nauman Hussein guilty on all 20 manslaughter charges he faced.
It was a trial full of surprises, starting with the August 2022 decision by Judge Lynch to throw out a plea deal from the previous judge. That decision moved the case to trial in the first place. A week of jury selection ending with 3 jurors dismissed and a trial expected to last for weeks, ending in just days. We have team coverage tonight. CBS 6's Ashley Dager and Brianna Sapardi live for us tonight. First, we send things over to Ashley, who has covered this trial from day one. Good evening, Ashley.
Good evening, Greg. All day we have waited for this verdict, but the family members that sat alongside us in that courtroom have waited nearly 5 years. 20 names each were read off with their charge of manslaughter in the second degree, and they were read as guilty, as it was met with many tears.
It's been a long time coming. It may have been a shorter trial than people thought, but for those of us sitting in that courtroom, that was a long trial, and those were long, long days.
Families of the Schoharie crash victims receiving justice after just 6 days of testimony in a long-awaited trial.
Do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty? Guilty. With respect to the crime.
4.5 years. I kept telling him, Michael, I will fight for you. I will not give up until I get justice, and praise God, it's finally been done.
The jury finding Nauman Hussein guilty on 20 counts of second-degree manslaughter more than 4 years after that tragic day. The courtroom filled with family members with tears in their eyes as they heard each charge with the same verdict. Jurors took almost a full day to seal Hussein's fate, guilty.
It was not just one thing, it was the constant showing of issues. There was this constant not taking care of things, or constant breakdown of things that showed a pattern.
His release status is revoked, and I am remanding him to the custody of the Schoharie County Sheriff.
Those tears in the courtroom quickly turning to cheers as Hussein was taken into custody after the judge denied his lawyer's final plea for his freedom as he awaits sentencing. Now, the sentencing for Hussein will be held in 2 weeks, May 31st at 9:30 a.m. And after the verdict was read, defense attorney Lee Kinlan walked out of the courthouse and spoke with us, and he said that he will be appealing this decision. Reporting live in Schoharie, Ashley Dager, CBS 6 News.
CBS 6 News starts now.
Find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
With respect to the crime of manslaughter in the second degree in violation of section 125.
Hold on a second.
First at 6:30 tonight, a jury has reached a verdict in the Schoharie limousine crash trial, finding Nauman Hussein guilty on 20 counts of manslaughter. And you just heard the shocking cries of anguish and joy from those in attendance.
And CBS 6's Ashley Dager has covered this trial since the beginning. She joins us live now to break down the day. Ashley?
Well, JT, we came into the courthouse around 9:30 and the jury had walked in and they continued deliberations after Judge Lynch saw each one was in attendance. Now, after that, we waited hours and hours, and within just a few hours, a note from a juror was brought into the courtroom. And once Judge Lynch walked back into the courtroom, all of us, we just stood still. We were waiting for what would happen. We didn't know what would happen, if they had reached a verdict, if it was a note about a certain question. And it was about a note reading off the differences of the two charges. So then Judge Lynch brought back in the jury and he defined the two charges again. Again, they were excused and continued deliberation. And then the verdict was reached, and it was just absolutely quiet in the courtroom once Judge Lynch announced that the verdict had been reached, and 20 of the names were read off, with each of the charge of manslaughter in the second degree and that charge again being guilty. Now, as those names were read off, they were met with tears and cheers, just as Liz mentioned, and it was just so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The emotion in there was just absolutely powerful, and we're still really going through it right now. Reporting live in Schoharie, Dager, CBS 6 News.